Germany's Democratic Socialist Party, Die Linke, or the left in English, doubled their vote share in last week's federal election, winning around 9% of the popular vote. That means they now hold 64 seats in Germany's parliament. That's a little more than 10% of the total. Earlier today, my colleague Stephen Methven was joined by the party's co-leader, Ines Schwerdtner, to discuss that result. But given that European leaders are now scrambling to formulate a defense agreement in the wake of the Ukraine war and US President Donald Trump's reorientation towards Russia, he began by asking Ines about her party's position on European security.
We had just had a meeting also with our party leadership this weekend at the same time. And we were always for peace negotiations and diplomacy in this war. And I think the situation just shows how much Europe and also Germany just missed out on that. 3 years too late. Now we're asking ourselves, what is the European initiative? I think it just comes too late because it was crystal clear before Trump was president that he would probably, pull out of this war. And he did so now in a very, frank manner. But we knew before that Putin is an imperialist who wants to get on with this war. And also that, Trump wants, what we know now, wants resources from Ukraine. So I think Europe must take a stronger stance, but rather for diplomacy and not to become like an imperial power itself.
Yeah, on that question of an imperial power, I was looking at your 2021 campaign and your position on European security then. And I wondered what you thought of that view in retrospect. So as I understand it, the position then was demilitarization broadly, the removal of NATO bases from German soil, if not all of Europe, and a kind of European security pact that would involve Russia. Looking back, what do you make of that policy now?
We were right about NATO in a sense that, as you can see, Europe should not only belong to the US. As you can see, we cannot really rely on that. Also, a European defense strategy, I think, is in order still. But obviously, our stance towards Russia has changed. So I think what we need is still a European defense architecture, but that is not based on military power, but on, negotiations and defense, and not to be able to actually attack other countries. I think this is a difference that we still make. And I think when it comes to an architecture that involves Russia, that will probably be in only 10, 20, 30 years of time. So I think that the Ukraine war is a major setback in that kind of architecture, but Russia will still be on the map even, in 20 years. So that's why we're still hanging on to this.
Ines, Die Linke had a pretty amazing result in the recent federal elections in Germany. In 2021, the party did very, very poorly, and then it was followed by splits that, for many in the media in Germany, looked like an extinction event for Die Linke. And yet you've now come back with 8% of the vote, very substantial presence in parliament. How do you diagnose that success? What changed? What happened?
Well, the German media thought we were dead after the split because BSW seemed to be very strong, and they had a very strong and what I say regressive migration policy. And so we lost in some of the elections, in the European election and in the elections in Eastern Germany. And when Jan van Aken and I, when we became leaders of Die Linke, we decided to focus back on social equality, so on the issues that people are interested most. And we used a method, I think, which in the UK as well, which was like major and massive canvassing. So we went to thousands of people, knocked on their doors, asked them, what is your priority? What are your issues right now? And what came out was rent and high prices. So inflation, still minding people's, still being on people's minds. So we made that, the core of our campaign. So we campaigned around social equality most, and we still went on canvassing. We went to, I think, 630,000 doors. We were knocking them. And we had thousands of activists being, really, really active and mobilized. So while the other parties talked about migration, we kept on talking about social issues. And also we worked as a team. So what people did not think we would be able to after the split, we worked as a team better than ever before. So we used all our resources to win direct mandates and to also be really clear on class struggle on social media. And I think all of that together worked really well. So the strategy went really well. And also, I mean, we were lucky that the other parties made mistakes, in the sense that the Social Democrats and the Greens really made a lot of room by being too, not opposing the Christian Democrats enough. And at a moment, 2 weeks before the election, when the Christian Democrats worked together with the right-wing AfD, we were the only real opposition in parliament. And I think people saw that and thought, okay, we need a real firewall against, the fascists, and only Die Linke could be that opposition. So we also gained from that. But I think it was a mixture of our own strategy and the circumstances around us.
One of the most striking results for Die Linke in this election was that you really won amongst young people. I think a quarter of 18 to 24-year-olds in Germany voted for the party. But I suppose there's a question there about whether that's a sustainable base on which to grow, given that the AfD is making gains across all age groups, and especially in East Germany, which is traditionally Die Linke's stronghold. So I guess my next question is, how are you going to tackle the AfD in terms of gaining votes from them, or is that not part of Die Linke's growth strategy?
In the European election in spring, the right was really strong among the young voters. And so we were breaking this blue wall, as we call it, by being really active on social media. We reached out to young voters a lot more. And I think you can see it in the results that we tried to reach them better, but also to give them some sort of, utopia, some kind of vision of there is a future and the future is left. And not that depressing, right-wing narrative. So I think that was one thing. And when it comes to the AfD in the East, I mean, the whole map of East Germany is blue, basically, except for some red dots. And we are the red dots. So we have our strongholds in Berlin, Leipzig, different places. And I think we need to learn from that. So in my own district, I could beat the AfD also by knocking on thousands of doors, by giving out lots of concrete help in a sense that we are checking people's bills for their heating, for example. We do that, it does not cost anything. People can come to me, to my office, in case they need any help. So I think this old kind of tactics that we also used in East Germany before to reach out for people, that we're using again. So we're kind of getting back to our core principles of a socialist party, to be really close to the people. And I think this is the only recipe that we've got to actually beat the AfD, with like strong social policies, being very much there for everyone in the neighborhoods, also in their workplaces, to be really in society. But I mean, we're also gaining in West German cities among the young people. And so we kind of have both strategies to win back AfD voters and non-voters in the East, but to also win over social democratic voters or young voters in the West. So we kind of have two strategies at the same time now, which shows that East and West Germany is still kind of divided, and you need to have two sort of ways of talking to people.
The circumstances under which these elections took place were particularly difficult when it came to migration, because there were two large-scale attacks in Germany in the months leading up to the election. And I think, except for Die Linke, all of the parties have moved to a migrant-skeptical or anti-migrant position. How do you tackle that sense of anti-migrant feeling in Germany, which is clearly growing, or do you tackle it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant when we were the only real firewall against the right, because Social Democrats and Greens were basically bowing down to the Conservatives, saying, yes, we need stronger border controls, for example. And we were always saying You cannot control the whole border of Germany, first of all. And second of all, it doesn't solve any social issue that we have. I mean, we do defend the right to asylum, and we're the only party now that actually does that. We do that in a very offensive way, because we say people are fleeing from wars, and what we need to do is stop the wars and help the refugees that come here. And also, 20% of the people living in Germany are migrants or have a background coming from another place. And I think this is like one third of the population in Germany, and we do need a way of finding work and a place for them to be here, to live in, and just in social society, all of us. And I think we're the only party who has this kind of vision that we can do that. But all we need is the resources to do that. And this is when it comes to the discussion we have now with the debt break and with, resources for infrastructure, for schools, for like teachers and all of that. Because austerity politics in Germany, as you know, is like, we are like the root of the problem in all over Europe. But yes, we have it in our own country. And so I think the other parties use migration and say this is the mother of all problems. And we always say it's not migration, it is the mother of all problems. But that our cities and our districts, we don't have enough money to spend on infrastructure and all we need on a daily basis. So we're trying to move the field from migration to social policies.
But doesn't that diagnosis that the problem is a lack of funding, a lack of resourcing in cities towards social housing and so forth, doesn't that argument start to look like it can't be answered because there are pressures to spend money elsewhere? So, for example, calls to increase defence spending by huge amounts, as we've just done in the UK, even though there is an effect, an ongoing austerity here. So how do you counter the answer that you're bound to get, which is that there just isn't any more money?
So the situation is very complex now in Germany, because we have a moment now, 1 week after the election, where the new chancellor, Friedrich Merz, wants to use the old majorities of the Bundestag to vote for, and I have to take care of the numbers now, 800 billion euros in order, for defense, but also for infrastructure. And we are against this because we say you cannot use old majorities in order to give out this massive amount of money for defense. Because what we have right now, the situation in the new parliament is that because Die Linke is so strong, they need to talk to us in order to gain a 2/3 majority to change, the law. So they need us actually in the new government. And so what we say is you need to change the debt break. We need to get rid of the debt break in order to have all the money for everything that we just talked about. And so this will be the biggest issue now, which is on the table. Will this new government use old majorities also for militarization and defense? Or will they wait 2 more weeks when the new Bundestag is formed? And will they also come to us and talk to us about reforming the debt break, which I think will be massive. It would be historical if we could change that and also change, the debt rules also in Europe. So I think this will have a major effect also on other European countries. So this is the biggest task we have now, to force the new government, but also the Greens, to say, no, let's take this time, this historical time, to get rid of the debt break and not use our money only for defense. Because what will happen, and the Conservatives have already said this, that they want to have a new Agenda 2030. And the last Agenda 2010 was famous, by Social Democrats, was famous for cutting down the social state and the welfare state, for cutting down on workers' rights. And, it was like historic in its own sense. And if we face another Agenda 2030. I think this will be the greatest attacks on the social state that we've faced since 20 years. So yeah, this will be this will be this is what we're facing right now. So yeah, the next 2 weeks will be very important, and we'll see how far they go.
Not just the next 2 weeks, but the next four years, perhaps, because one sort of convention of German politics is that parties don't work with the far right. Sometimes it's called the firewall. Do you think that, I mean, the CDU must be looking at the AfD majority and thinking, the AfD electoral result, and thinking that would make for a nice coalition. Do you think that the firewall is something that's going to hold in this parliament? And if the AfD increases its vote in the next election, it was 20% at the moment, do you think it will hold after that?
I mean, they were breaking down this firewall 2 weeks before the election. So this is why we said, if you do it this one time for migration, you will probably do it in the next crisis and the next situation where you need it. So I don't trust the conservatives on this at all. I mean, obviously, you cannot. But we still need to hold the pressure up high. It cannot, we cannot normalize that they just rely on votes of the AfD. And I think it's also our job to demonize that and to say, well, if we become like Austria and if we work together with the fascists on a daily basis, then some like democratic principles are out of order, especially in Germany. Almost 80 years after the Second World War, this is something historic, and people are afraid of that. This is why we gained so many votes. And I think we cannot rely on that. And thus, we need to have a strategy to defend the AfD on the long run and to prevent an AfD chancellor in 4 years. This is why we're saying we're fighting against the far right, obviously, but we're also fighting against austerity politics, because this is, this gives paves the way for the right wing to gain stronger. And I think this is why we have this third pole, or we're fighting against neoliberal policies and at the same time against the far right. This is what we do in the next 4 years. Yes.
So J.D. Vance, when he was in Europe, talked about kind of hinted at the idea of a democratic deficit. If you have 20% of the German population voting for a party that isn't going to be allowed to rule, that seems to look like a democratic deficit. But another argument I've heard is that actually by not letting them participate in government, you don't let the German public see quite how badly they would do. And instead they remain a party that they can sort of project all their fantasies onto without actually ever seeing the destruction or, the damage that they might be able to do when they're in government. What do you think of that argument?
There's always people who say, yeah, if they just begin to rule, they will demask themselves and you will just see how bad they are. But I think if you look at Austria and other countries, for example, the destruction that the far right is doing to the people and to the welfare state, it's just massive. And it's the same in the AfD as with other European countries. They're basically neoliberal kind of fascist. So I'm not surprised that J.D. Vance, other libertarian stupid people, think this is part of democracy. Just let them do. So there is a wing in the AfD that is still neoliberal, like Alice Weidel, who Elon Musk seems to love now. But there's also this really right-wing Nazi wing, and I think you underestimate their power, especially in East Germany. If you just say, okay, let them be part of the game for some time, I think the damage that they could do and are already doing in East Germany is so massive that I don't really rely on this kind of argument. And I think, yeah, we as the left, we must find a strategy to not make them look as, the victims, of the whole discourse, because they are not. They're definitely not the victims. And you need to show that they have the program only for the rich. So the program of the AfD only is for like the top 10%. of the people. So what we say is, if you're a worker, the AfD is not going to do anything for you, and we need to win the votes back. And so I'm trying not to get into that discourse too much, but to focus on regaining people, especially in the East, and not making them what they want to be. Seem like the victim of German discourse, which they're not.
The German left has often seemed to isolate itself from the wider left on its position on Palestine. And in the context of Gaza, I wonder if you could just lay out what Die Linke's position is on that war, on that genocide, and on Palestinian self-determination in general.
On our last party convention, we talked about it intensively, that we don't allow double standards, not in this war, but not in any war. And that is to say, we say that if someone like Putin is a war criminal, and if he comes to Germany, we'll definitely take him into prison. It's the same with Netanyahu. If he commits war crimes, which I think he does, there is a court that rules out on that, then if he comes to Germany, which he might do in a couple of days because Friedrich Merz invited him, then actually he will get into prison. And I think it's important to say that we are the party that relies on human rights and on basic rights and on international law, first of all, and that we always take the stance of victims in this war. And that goes for Ukraine and the same like the war in Gaza. So we defend the rights of the people and also the two-state solution, and to have a Palestinian state. And I know this is, something, and especially in the German left, it is debated on a very, very emotional manner because of the German history, which everyone knows. But I think our party convention last October was very clear on that, and we act on that on a daily basis, even if some people might, say something else. But I think our position is very clear on that.
I mean, in that interview, Stephen mentioned the two deadly car attacks that happened in Germany before the election, one in Magdeburg and the other in Munich. The suspect in each attack was a refugee living in Germany from a majority Muslim country. So that very much sort of played towards the AfD during the election. Hours after that interview, there was another car attack in Germany, this time in the city of Mannheim. 2 people have been reported killed in the attack. An arrest has also been made. The suspect has been described as a 40-year-old German man without a migration background. No motive has yet been attributed by the police.